Hey friends, welcome to Sleepy Time Stories. Here, we tell amazing stories from history in a calm and cozy way, perfect for winding down anytime, anywhere. Before we jump in, tell me in the comments what you're up to while listening. Are you snuggled in bed, sipping your favorite drink, or just taking a quiet moment to yourself? I love hearing how you enjoy these stories, so get comfy, relax, and let's go on another gentle journey through time together. Tonight we drift into a land where the mountains wear crowns of snow, and the seas hold the memory of storms. A land where the air is alive with unseen watchers and every rustle of leaves might be the breath of something divine. For in Japan, the gods are not locked away in a distant sky. They walk among the living as kami, dwelling in rivers and forests, in the roar of thunder and the warmth of sunlight, shaping the stories, festivals, and beliefs of a people. For over 2,000 years, and in this quiet journey, we will meet these gods one by one, learning not only their names and their power, but the way they touch the soul of a nation, until their presence feels as real as the night around you. The beginning of Japan's gods lies in a vision of a world not yet formed, when the heavens and the earth were still mixed like mist before dawn. And from that formless silence rose the first kami, gentle beings of pure light and will, shaping the islands with hands unseen. And among these early divine figures were Izanagi and Izanami, the male and female who would stand at the threshold of creation, holding a jeweled spear above the swirling sea, letting its drops fall to become the first solid land. And from this act the bones of Japan were set, its mountains rising like the backs of sleeping dragons, its rivers winding like silver threads, a landscape born not from chance, but from the careful touch of gods who would remain in its stones, its water and its wind forever. Among all the kami who emerged from the shaping of Japan, none would shine brighter than Amaterasu, the radiant sun goddess, born from the cleansing ritual of her father Izanagi, when he returned from the shadowed land of the dead, and in her light the world took color. The seas glittered, the rice fields ripened, and the seasons kept their gentle rhythm. Yet her brilliance was not only in the warmth she gave, but in the order she brought. For she became the spiritual heart of Japan, the ancestor from whom emperors claimed their divine bloodline. Her name whispered in shrines bathed in gold, and in prayers carried by the first light of dawn, a reminder that in Shinto belief the sun was not just a star in the sky, but a living presence watching over the nation. Steady and eternal, Amaterasu was the warmth of the day. Then Tsukuyomi was the calm breath of night, the moon god whose silver gaze drifted over the quiet waters and sleeping villages of Japan. Born alongside his sister yet destined to walk a separate path, his light softer and slower, a mirror to the sun's brilliance, bringing balance to the endless cycle of time, and in his presence the world seemed to hush. The tides swelled and fell in his rhythm, the shadows stretched long and cool, and while the sun was worshipped in great festivals, the moon's beauty lived in the quieter moments, in lovers parting at dusk, in the glimmer of frost on winter mornings, in the belief that even the darkness was not empty, but held its own divine keeper watching from the heights of the sky, where Amaterasu brought light, and Tsukuyomi brought calm. Susanoo came like the roar of waves against the cliffs, the storm god whose presence was felt in the crash of thunder, the howl of typhoons, and the restless surge of the sea, a force both feared and revered. For while his tempests could tear apart villages and sink ships, they could also bring the rains that fed the rice fields and kept the land alive. And in the oldest stories, he was a wanderer and a warrior, wild in spirit yet capable of great heroism, remembered most for the day he faced the monstrous serpent Orochi, his blade flashing through the storm until the beast fell, and from its body he drew the legendary sword Kusanagi, a gift that would pass into the hands of emperors, sealing Susanoo's place as not only a god of destruction, but a bringer of treasures, and a protector in times of peril. Inari descended not with thunder or blinding light, but with the quiet rustle of wind, through ripening rice, a god whose gifts were measured in the fullness of harvests and the prosperity of households, guardian of farmers, merchants, and all who sought abundance. And though Inari's form could shift between male and female, human and spirit, they were most often accompanied by foxes, the sacred messengers whose watchful eyes and swift steps carried the god's will. their statues standing in ranks at countless shrines, each one draped in a red bib as if dressed for a festival. And in the glow of lanterns on autumn nights, when offerings of sake and rice were left before the shrine gates, it was said that Inari's blessing moved silently through the fields, weaving life into every stalk, ensuring that no winter would come empty-handed. Hachiman came not with the softness of rice fields, but with the steady tread of warriors on the march, a god revered as the divine protector of Japan and the patron of samurai. His name carried like a battle standard into countless wars, yet his spirit was not only in the clash of swords, but in the discipline, loyalty, and honor that shaped the warrior's path. And though his origins were tied to the ancient emperors, his presence spread far beyond the court, standing watch over coastal villages, temples, and military outposts alike. His shrines marked by towering gates and banners that swayed in the wind like the crests of an army at rest, and in the minds of those who prayed before him, Hachiman was both the shield against foreign threat and the unseen general, whose wisdom guided Japan's defenders through centuries of blood and sacrifice. Raijin was the rolling drumbeat in the sky, the thunder god whose fierce eyes and clawed hands struck terror into those who heard his storms, his great drums ringing like the heartbeat of the heavens as lightning tore across the clouds. And though his fury could shatter trees and set the night aflame, he was not merely a destroyer, for the rains that followed his storms soaked the soil and brought life back to the fields, making him a god both feared and honored. His image carved in temple gates with a snarl upon his face, surrounded by swirling clouds and sacred drums, a reminder that power and chaos were part of the same divine order, and that without the storm, there could be no renewal. Fujin raced across the sky with a grin as wild as the mountain gales, the wind god who carried a great bag upon his back, and with each swing he released currents that could bend forests, lift rooftops, and send ships dancing upon the waves. Yet his winds were not always cruel, for they also swept away the stifling heat of summer, cleared the clouds to reveal the moon, and carried the scent of blooming cherry trees across the valleys. And in the great temples, he was often shown beside Raijin, the two locked in an eternal chase of storm and breeze, their powers twined in both destruction and blessing. For in the Shinto view, even the fiercest forces of nature could carry the gentle hand of the divine. Benzaiten moved like the ripple of water under moonlight, the goddess of music, eloquence, and flowing rivers. Her presence felt in the gentle pluck of a biwa's strings and in the murmur of streams winding through temple gardens. And though her origins reached back to distant lands, she became woven into the soul of Japan. Her shrines often built beside lakes or on small islands where the air was still and the reflections endless. And those who sought her favor came not only with prayers for skill and inspiration, but for fortune itself, believing her blessings could turn the tide of chance as surely as a current bends a boat. And in the evenings when the wind softened and the lanterns glowed upon the water, it was said her voice could be heard like a song carried by the night. Across the mountains and coasts of Japan, the presence of these gods wove itself into the rhythm of daily life so completely that to live was to walk within their domain. For the farmer offering rice to Inari before planting the first seeds for the warrior bowing, before Hachiman's shrine before battle, for the fisherman whispering a prayer to the sea before pushing his boat into the waves, each act was both devotion and survival. And the land itself became a living shrine where every gust of wind might carry Fujin's laughter, every distant rumble could be Raijin's drums, every warm sunrise was Amaterasu's gift, and every quiet night under the moon was Tsukuyomi's watch, so that the divine was never distant, but always breathing beside the people in a bond that endured through centuries of change. The shrines of Japan rose not as towering monuments, but as quiet gateways between the human world and the realm of the kami, their wooden beams weathered by rain and sun, their roofs curved like the gentle line of distant hills, each one marked by a torii gate that stood like a frame to another reality, and stepping beneath it was to leave behind the dust of the ordinary. For the stillness of the sacred here, priests in white robes moved with deliberate grace, their voices weaving prayers through the scent of burning incense, while worshippers approached with small offerings of rice salt or sake, each gift a bridge to the god who dwelled there. And whether the shrine stood in the heart of a crowded city or deep within a forest glade the air within. Its bounds seemed different, softer, as though the god was listening from just beyond sight. The emperors of Japan traced their lineage to Amaterasu, claiming the sun itself as their divine ancestor. This connection was not merely symbolic, for it formed the foundation of imperial authority, binding the throne to the realm of the gods. In the great shrine of eyes, dedicated to Amaterasu, the inner sanctum was rebuilt every 20 years, a ritual of renewal that kept the bond between the imperial family and the goddess alive. Pilgrims traveled for days to stand at the outer gates, knowing they would never see the sacred mirror within, for it was reserved for the eyes of the high priestess and the emperor alone. Through centuries of war and peace, this belief in the emperor's divine heritage lent a sense of unbroken continuity, as if the light that rose each morning was the same light that once touched the first sovereign of Japan. Tsukuyomi's legacy was subtle, woven into the quiet moments of Japanese life rather than the grand rituals of the state. His moonlight marked the passing of months, guiding farmers in planting and harvest, fishermen in timing their voyages, and poets in choosing the night for moon-viewing gatherings. Festivals like Sakimi were held in his honor, when families would set offerings of rice dumplings and pampas grass beneath the open sky, watching the silver disk drift above the darkened hills. While Amaterasu's worship was bound to the authority of the throne, Tsukuyomi's presence belonged to everyone who had ever paused to watch the night sky and felt its stillness settle into their bones. He was the keeper of time's gentler face, the reminder that even in darkness, beauty could endure. Susanu's shrines stood where land met the restless sea, their gates facing the horizon as if watching for storms on the water's edge. Sailors prayed to him before setting out, offering sake and fish in hopes his tempers would spare their voyage. For the god of storms was as unpredictable as the weather he commanded. In the inland provinces, his story as the slayer of the eight-headed serpent Orochi was celebrated in festivals, where dancers in fierce masks reenacted the battle, drums pounding like distant thunder. The sword he claimed from the serpent, Kusanagi, became one of the three sacred treasures of Japan, a symbol of imperial power, binding his legend to the nation's fate. To honor Susanu was to respect both the fury and the generosity of the sea, knowing that in a single tide, he could destroy or protect. Inari's presence flowed through both countryside and city, making the god one of the most widely worshipped in Japan. In rural villages, farmers placed offerings at small roadside shrines before the planting season, hoping for full harvests and protection from pests. In bustling towns, merchants sought Inari's blessing for prosperity, tying the god's favor not only to the land but to commerce and fortune. The fox, Inari's messenger, became an enduring symbol. Statues of them stood at shrine gates, their sharp faces frozen in watchfulness, each one holding a key, a jewel, or a sheaf of rice in its mouth. During festivals, paths to Inari's shrines were lined with rows of vermilion torii gates, creating tunnels of red that glowed in the sunlight, guiding pilgrims forward like a path into the heart of the divine. Hakumen's rise as the spirit of the samurai began in the age when warlords vied for power, and the fate of provinces was decided by the sword. Though originally revered as a god of agriculture and the protector of the imperial line, he became the divine patron of warriors, embodying not only martial strength but the virtues of loyalty, discipline, and service. Samurai would bow before his shrines before departing for battle, seeking his blessing to return with honor or to meet death without shame. His temples often stood near coastal fortresses, where banners bearing his name snapped in the sea wind like the call of a war horn. Even in times of peace, Hakumen's presence reminded Japan that strength must be tempered with duty, and that the warrior's path was as much about protecting the land as it was about conquering it. Ra-Ijin's storms were more than a spectacle. In the sky they were moments when the people felt the raw nearness of the divine. Farmers feared his thunder might flatten their crops, yet they also knew the rain that followed could save them from drought. Children were warned to keep their belly buttons covered during storms, a playful yet persistent tale that Raijin might snatch them away if left exposed. His likeness, fierce and muscular, was carved into temple gates to guard against evil. his ring of drums poised for the next strike of lightning. In great summer storms, when the air split with light and sound, it was said that Raijin was reminding the people of nature's power, a force that could destroy in a heartbeat, but also awaken the world with new life. Fujin's winds came without warning, rushing down from the mountains or sweeping in from the open sea, carrying with them the smell of pine forests, salt spray, or far-off rain. In paintings and carvings, he was shown with wild hair streaming behind him, clutching the great sack from which all the winds of the world flowed. When typhoons struck, people believed Fujin and Raijin were racing together across the sky, their combined strength shaping the fate of the land below. Yet Fujin's gentler breezes were just as important, for they cooled the sweltering summers, spread the fragrance of plum blossoms in spring, and stirred the waters for fishermen watching the horizon. In every gust, whether fierce or soft, the people sensed his restless spirit moving unseen through their lives. Benzaiten's voice was said to flow like the rivers she ruled, clear and unbroken, carrying beauty and fortune wherever it was heard. Musicians prayed to her before performances, believing her blessing could turn skill into brilliance, while merchants sought her favor to guide wealth into their hands as surely as a river carries water to the sea. Many of her shrines were built on islands where the sound of waves against the shore seemed to blend with her unseen music. At Enoshima and Miyajima, pilgrims crossed to her sanctuaries under the shifting colors of the sky, leaving offerings of coins, silk, or delicate strings for instruments. In her presence, water became more than a resource. It was a symbol of flow, abundance, and the quiet power to shape the world without force. Across Japan, the shrines of these gods often stood within sight of one another, their domains overlapping like threads in a vast woven tapestry. A mountainside might hold a shrine to Fujin for the winds that swept its slopes, while at its base a small altar to Inari promised the fertility of the rice fields. Below, in coastal towns, fishermen might pray to Susanoo for calm seas, then climb the hill to offer thanks to Hakumen for protection against raiders, and in the great city's shrines to Amaterasu Raijin, Benzaiten and others were linked by paths lined with lanterns so that a pilgrim could walk from one divine presence to the next without leaving the heart of the sacred. In this shared space, the gods were not rivals, but guardians working in balance, each one shaping a different part of life, yet all bound together in the spiritual landscape of Japan. The sacred objects tied to Japan's gods were more than symbols. They were vessels of presence and power. Amaterasu's mirror, kept hidden in the shrine at eyes, reflected not only light, but the eternal bond between the goddess and the imperial line. Susanoo's sword, Kusanagi, was said to carry the courage and strength of the storm. Inari's fox statues held keys to the granaries, guarding the nation's food. Raijin's drums, carved into temple gates, were thought to keep evil at bay with their thunder. Benzaiten's biwa called forth beauty, fortune, and inspiration. Each treasure was placed with care in a shrine or carried in a festival procession, its sight reminding the people that their gods were not distant dreams, but living forces woven into the fabric of their lives. The mountains of Japan were seen as the highest dwellings of the gods. Their peaks stood above the mists, untouched by human hands, and their slopes were cloaked in ancient forests where the air was thick with silence. Pilgrims climbed them not only for the view, but to step closer to the divine. Mount Fuji, with its perfect cone, became a symbol of sacred beauty, linked to both Shinto and Buddhist belief. Smaller peaks held hidden shrines where offerings of sake and rice were left at weathered stone altars. In winter, snow turned the summits into pale crowns, and in summer, clouds wrapped them in shifting veils. To the people, these heights were more than landforms. They were living beings, breathing with the presence of the gods who had watched over Japan since the beginning. The rivers and waters of Japan were believed to be the veins of the land, carrying the blessings of the gods. From the mountains to the sea, springs bubbling from hidden rocks were treated as holy, their waters collected for purification before rituals. Wide rivers like the Kamo in Kyoto became the setting for festivals, where paper boats carrying prayers drifted downstream under lantern light. Lakes mirrored the sky so perfectly that they were seen as gateways to the divine. their surfaces disturbed only by the passage of a breeze or the shadow of a crane in flight. Water was not only life but a sacred boundary, cleansing those who touched it and linking them to Benzaiten, Suijin, and countless local water kami, whose presence flowed silently through every stream. The forests of Japan were seen as vast natural temples where the presence of the gods could be felt in every rustle of leaves. Towering cedars and ancient pines stood like pillars holding up the sky, their roots twisting through moss-covered stones that had not been disturbed for centuries. Shrines were often built deep within these woods, their paths marked by torii gates and lined with fox statues or lanterns that glowed faintly. In the shadows, priests would walk these trails at dawn, their footsteps soft on the earth, carrying offerings to the kami who dwelled unseen among the trees. In Shinto belief, the stillness of a forest was not emptiness, but the quiet breath of the divine, a reminder that the gods were always near, hidden yet watching. Animals were seen as the trusted messengers and companions of the gods, each chosen for the qualities that reflected their divine master. The fox served Inari, clever and watchful, slipping between the worlds of spirit and man. Doves flew for Hachiman, carrying the promise of peace after war. Serpents coiled at the side of Benzaiten, symbols of flowing water and fortune. Thunderous Ragin was followed by great black crows in the storm. Even the humble carp, strong enough to swim upstream against the current, was honored as a creature of perseverance and blessing. These animals were not worshipped in place of the gods, but honored as their envoys, and when they appeared in the fields, skies, or rivers, it was taken as a sign that the divine was close at hand. Pilgrimages to the shrines of the gods were journeys of both body and spirit. Some paths wound through mountain forests for days, marked by stone lanterns and weathered statues, while others followed the coastline, where the scent of salt and the roar of waves accompanied each step. The road to Eyes, where Amaterasu was honored, drew countless travelers each year, from farmers in straw sandals to nobles in lacquered palanquins. In the north, pilgrims climbed to Hachiman's hilltop shrines, their armor or robes damp with mist. Every pilgrimage was a slow shedding of the everyday world, a way to walk closer to the gods with each mile. The arrival at a shrine was not the end but a moment of quiet union, a bow before the torii, and the knowledge that the divine had felt their presence as surely as they felt its. The great festivals that honored multiple gods transformed towns and cities into seas of color and sound. Streets were lined with paper lanterns, their warm light swaying above stalls selling sweet rice cakes and grilled fish. Drums thundered for Ragin, flutes sang for Benzaiten, and dancers in fox masks moved for Inari, their steps echoing the rhythms of ancient prayers. Portable shrines called makoshi were carried through the crowds on the shoulders of chanting men, swaying as if the gods inside were enjoying the ride. Children ran alongside, tossing flower petals, while elders watched from doorways, remembering the festivals of their youth. These gatherings blurred the lines between the human and divine worlds, as if for one night the gods walked openly among the people, sharing in their joy. The gods were not distant overseers, but shapers of the moral spine that held Japan together. Their stories and commands wove themselves into the fabric of Bushido, the way of the warrior, and into the everyday codes of the farmer, the artisan, and the courtier. Hachiman's spirit urged loyalty and service beyond self-interest. Amaterasu's light demanded honesty and the upholding of truth. Inari taught resourcefulness and the reward of diligence. Even the stormy nature of Susanoo became a lesson that passion without restraint could bring ruin, but tempered courage could guard the land. These divine ideals were repeated in the tales told by elders, carved into shrine pillars, and whispered. In moments of choice, they reminded every soul, from the lowest fisherman to the emperor himself, that their actions were witnessed not only by the living, but by the unseen eyes of the kami. In times of war, the gods became both shield and sword. Before battles, generals rode to ancient shrines, offering white rice, sake, and sprigs of sakaki to win divine favor. Hachiman's banners fluttered above the armies, his image painted on armor plates and war drums, a silent promise of protection. Soldiers prayed to Bishamantan for courage and to Amaterasu for the light of justice to guide their cause. On the eve of combat, monks would chant sutras and call upon the kami to blind enemy eyes, strengthen weary limbs, and guide arrows true when victory came. Shrines overflowed with offerings. When defeat struck, the defeated still knelt in the dust, thanking the gods for life spared. In every clash of steel, warriors felt the unseen presence of the divine, as if the wind that carried the sound of battle also carried the breath of the gods. When foreign fleets approached Japan's shores, the people turned their eyes to the gods for salvation. In the 13th century, as the Mongol invaders crossed the sea, prayers rose from every temple and shrine, calling upon Hakumen, Susanoo, and the sea kami to guard the homeland. The wind began to howl across the waves, dark clouds thickened, and what followed became legend. The kamikaze, the divine wind, tearing through the enemy ships and scattering them like leaves before a storm. To the Japanese, it was not chance, but the hand of the gods themselves, shielding their sacred islands from conquest. This belief wove itself deep into the nation's soul, a reminder that the kami did not merely watch over rice fields and harvests, but stood ready to defend the land itself when shadows from beyond threatened to fall. In the quiet years that followed such divine deliverance, shrines honoring the sea gods grew in number and splendor. Fishermen painted talismans of Ryujin on their boats, believing the dragon god of the deep would guide them through tempests and bring schools of fish to their nets. Inland, farmers offered the first sheaves of rice to Inari, for they knew the blessings of the land were tied to the mercy of the waters. Festivals grew from these devotions, vibrant with music, masks, and sacred dances that told of gods who rose from the waves or descended from the heavens. Each celebration was both a thanksgiving and a reaffirmation that the kami were not distant and unreachable, but walked unseen among their people, drinking the sake they poured, breathing the incense they burned, and listening to every whispered prayer. Among these divine figures, Amaterasu's presence remained the quiet axis around which all devotion turned. Her light was said to be the very soul of Japan, rising each dawn over mountains and seas to bathe the land in gold. In Shinto shrines, her mirror, the Yata no Kagami, was kept as a sacred symbol, reflecting not only the face of the worshipper, but also the truth within their heart. The priests taught that, in serving Amaterasu, one served harmony itself, for her radiance was the order that kept chaos at bay. Even the emperor, whose lineage was traced to her divine blood, approached her shrine and eyes with humility, stepping barefoot onto the sacred gravel, the air thick with cedar and silence. There, he would bow before a goddess unseen, yet felt in every ray of sunlight touching the land. Yet even with Amaterasu's light guiding the realm, the shadows were never far, for her storm-bringing brother Susanoo still held a place in the hearts of the people. They remembered not only his tempests, but also his heroism, for it was Susanoo who once faced the monstrous serpent Yamata no Orochi, a beast with 8 heads and 8 tails, whose scales were like iron. The story told how Susanoo, cast from the heavens, found a grieving family who had lost 7 daughters to the creature and had but one left. He devised a cunning trap, brewing vats of sake so potent that the very scent lured the serpent from its lair. One by one the heads drank deeply, falling into drunken slumber, and Susanoo struck, severing them in a fury of divine steel. From within the serpent's tail he drew forth a sword, the Kusanagi no Tsurugi, a treasure that would become one of Japan's 3 sacred regalia. This tale, redoled by firelight and festival, made Susanoo both feared and revered, a god of chaos, yes, but also of salvation in desperate hours. The Kusanagi no Tsurugi did not remain in Susanoo's hands, for he presented it to Amaterasu as a gesture of reconciliation, an offering to mend the rift between sun and storm. In time, the sword would pass into the care of mortal rulers, becoming a symbol of imperial authority alongside the mirror, Yata no Kagami, and the jewel Yasakani no Magatama. These 3 treasures, said to have descended from the gods themselves, were not mere ornaments, but the tangible proof that the emperor ruled by divine right. The sword represented valor, the mirror truth, and the jewel benevolence, and together they were the silent oath between heaven and earth. In ceremonies shrouded in secrecy, the regalia were presented to each new emperor, unseen by the public, their very mystery lending them an aura of untouchable power. Even now, their exact resting places remain hidden, guarded by ritual and tradition, a reminder that in Japan's sacred lineage, the breath of the gods still lingers. Hachiman's influence was not confined to warriors alone, for fishermen, farmers, and merchants also sought his blessing. In coastal villages, prayers to Hachiman were whispered before venturing into treacherous waters, asking for protection from storms and safe returns. In farming communities, he was honored during planting and harvest seasons, for even though he was a god of war, his guardianship extended to the stability of daily life. Over time, his worship became deeply woven into Japan's political fabric, with emperors and shoguns alike claiming his favor to legitimize their rule. Great processions, rich with banners, drums, and the scent of incense, would parade in his honor, turning towns into seas of color and sound. To the people, Hachiman was not merely a distant god of battles fought in far-off lands. He was a protector who walked beside them, unseen but ever present, in the struggles and triumphs of their own lives. Standing apart from the elemental and artistic deities is Hachiman, the divine protector of warriors and the patron god of samurai. His origins are layered, blending Shinto reverence with Buddhist influence, and his image evolved over centuries from a god of agriculture to a guardian of the realm. Known as the god of war, he was not a deity who glorified bloodshed, but one who championed honor, loyalty, and the defense of the people. Shrines dedicated to Hachiman often stood at the edges of battlefields or within castle grounds, their banners fluttering as silent prayers for victory. Samurai would bow before his image before riding into combat, believing that his blessing could turn the tide of war. His symbols, doves, and the bow spoke of both peace and readiness, a reminder that true strength lies in protecting rather than conquering. In the stillness of the shrine, a warrior could find courage not from rage, but from a deeper sense of duty, knowing that Hachiman watched over them like a steadfast sentinel in both life and death. Raijin and Fujin, the twin forces of storm and wind, were ever-present reminders of nature's raw power. Raijin's drums could shake the earth and split the sky, while Fujin's winds could bend forests and sweep the seas into frenzy. Yet their presence was not feared alone, it was respected and honored. For the storms they brought nourished the land and cleared the skies. Temples often displayed their fierce visages together, frozen in stone or painted on walls, reminding worshippers of the balance between chaos and life-giving force. During festivals, masked performers reenacted their battles, drums pounding, and wind instruments shrieking. And for one night the people felt the gods' tempestuous energy among them. In every gust, clap of thunder, and flash of lightning, the Japanese sensed not random chance, but the hands of Fujin and Raijin shaping the world. A reminder that even the fiercest power could be part of a greater harmony. Inari's foxes, the sacred messengers of the god of rice and prosperity, appeared in countless shrines across the land, their watchful eyes ever vigilant. Some were stone, others painted wood, many adorned with red bibs. As if dressed for a festival that never ended, pilgrims would leave offerings of rice, sake, or coins at their feet, believing that the foxes carried their prayers directly to the divine. Legends told of foxes that could transform into humans, guiding lost travelers or teaching lessons in humility and cleverness. During festivals, the torii gates lining paths to Inari shrines glowed vermilion, creating tunnels of devotion that led worshippers into the heart of the sacred. Through the silent presence of these animals, the people felt the immediacy of the divine, knowing that the gods moved among them in forms both familiar and mysterious. Rivers and lakes were the natural realms of Benzaiten, where water itself became a conduit for her blessings. Pilgrims would travel to her shrines perched on islands or along riverbanks, leaving coins or small boats as offerings. The gentle ripple of water was believed to carry prayers to her, and the reflection of the sky in a calm lake was thought to be a mirror of her divine presence. Festivals held on these waters featured music, floating lanterns, and dances that honored her grace, turning each ripple and wave into a reminder of her watchful care. Fishermen, travelers, and villagers alike felt her influence in the flow of rivers and tides, and even the smallest stream was treated with reverence. For in Japan's spiritual landscape, water was never empty, it was alive with the song and guidance of Benzaiten. The mountains of Japan were sacred thrones where the gods were believed to dwell close to the heavens. Peaks like Fuji, sacred since time immemorial, were pilgrimage destinations, drawing travelers who climbed steep paths to honor the divine. Smaller mountains held hidden shrines, where moss-covered stones marked altars and the air was thick with the scent of cedar and incense. Each footstep on these trails was a step closer to the gods, a moment of reflection and devotion. In winter, snow cloaked the summits like a holy veil, and in summer, clouds wrapped the peaks in shifting shadows. The mountains were not mere landforms. They were living, breathing spaces where the divine presence could be sensed, and where humans could feel the weight and majesty of the kami above and around them. Forests in Japan were more than collections of trees. They were sanctuaries of the divine, where spirits whispered through the leaves and roots curled around stones, as if guarding ancient secrets. Shrines hidden deep within these woods invited pilgrims to step into a world untouched by the ordinary, where the air was heavy with moss and the scent of cedar. Lanterns flickered along winding paths, fox statues kept silent watch, and the rustle of small animals reminded visitors of the unseen presence of the gods. Priests moved quietly, offering prayers and guidance, while worshippers left offerings of rice, sake, or flowers for the kami residing there. The forest itself became a living temple, teaching patience, reverence, and humility, and in its stillness, humans felt the silent breath of the divine brushing against the earth. Animals were the living messengers of the gods, their presence a bridge between the divine and the human world. Foxes served inari, their clever eyes and swift movements carrying prayers from village to shrine. Cranes and doves were symbols of peace and guidance, often appearing near Hakumen's shrines or during festivals to signal divine favor. Even serpents and dragons were revered, connected to rivers, lakes, and Benzaitin's watery domain. Guardians of both wealth and wisdom, folk tales spoke of animals transforming into humans, teaching lessons or delivering warnings, reminding people that the gods were never far. Every rustle, flutter, or distant cry in the fields, forests, or skies was seen as a sign that the divine was watching, active and present, guiding the rhythm of life with subtle, living hands. Pilgrimages to the shrines of Japan were journeys of devotion that tested both endurance and faith. Travelers walked for days, crossing mountains, forests, and rivers, following paths marked by stone lanterns and torii gates. At Eyes, the shrine of Amaterasu, pilgrims arrived in long lines leaving offerings of rice, sake, or coins, yet never seeing the sacred mirror itself, a symbol of humility and reverence. In northern regions, devotees climbed steep hills to reach Hakumen's shrines, braving wind and rain as part of their spiritual discipline. Each step was a meditation, each pause a silent prayer, and upon reaching the shrine, the traveler felt the weight of centuries of worship pressing gently upon them. These journeys were not simply physical, they were the crossing from the ordinary world into the presence of the divine, a walk that left the spirit forever changed. Festivals in Japan brought together gods, people, and the rhythms of nature in vibrant celebration. Streets and temple grounds overflowed with lanterns, banners, and the scent of incense, while drums and flutes echoed through towns and villages. Raijin's thunder and Fujin's winds were honored in performances, while dancers in fox masks celebrated Inari's cleverness. Mikoshi, portable shrines, were carried through the crowds, swaying as if the gods themselves rode among the people. Children ran, scattering petals, while elders watched with quiet reverence, remembering festivals of their youth. These gatherings blurred the boundary between human and divine, creating moments when the gods walked openly among mortals, their presence felt in music, motion, and the shared joy of community. Sacred treasures and objects were tangible links to the gods, vessels of power and presence. Amaterasu's mirror, kept hidden in eyes, reflected truth and the bond between deity and emperor. Susanu's sword, Kusanagi, symbolized courage and divine protection. Inari's fox statues guarded rice and prosperity, while Ra-Ejan's drums, carved into temple gates, warded off evil. Benzaiten's biwa inspired music, fortune, and artistry. These objects were never mere decoration. They were focal points for worship, processions, and offerings, carrying the prayers and devotion of countless generations. Through them, humans could feel the gods' influence in the material world, a constant reminder that the divine moved among them, shaping lives and destinies with both grace and authority. Amaterasu, the sun goddess, remained at the heart of Japan's spiritual landscape. Her light both literal and symbolic, she was revered as the ancestor of emperors, a divine presence whose radiance brought life, order, and harmony. The Ai's shrine, dedicated to her, was rebuilt every 20 years, a ritual of renewal that reinforced the sacred connection between heaven and the imperial line. Pilgrims traveled long distances to witness the shrine's gates, bowing in humility before a goddess they could not see, yet whose influence was felt in every sunrise. Her light guided farmers, inspired artists, and provided the moral compass for rulers and citizens alike. Amaterasu's presence was not distant. It was a constant illumination, reminding the people that the divine was woven into the very fabric of the land, life, and governance. Susanu's legacy endured through his acts of both chaos and heroism, a god whose storms and fury were matched by his courage and cunning. Known for slaying the eight-headed serpent Orochi, he demonstrated that even a god of tempest could protect and restore balance. His sword, Kusanagi, became one of Japan's 3 sacred treasures, linking his legend to imperial authority and the continuity of the nation. Shrines dedicated to him often stood near rivers, mountains, or coastal regions, places where his restless energy could be felt most strongly. Festivals recounted his battles in dances and music, reminding worshippers that power must be tempered by wisdom and that courage often comes through confronting danger with resolve. Susanoo was feared, revered, and remembered, a god whose dual nature reflected the unpredictability and majesty of the world itself. Hakumen's influence extended beyond warriors to the everyday lives of villagers, merchants, and travelers. Coastal communities prayed to him for safe voyages. Farmers sought his blessing for bountiful harvests, and local leaders offered festivals in his honor to ensure protection and prosperity. His image, often as an archer or armored figure, adorned shrines at castle gates and along pilgrimage routes, a reminder that courage and vigilance were virtues for all. The rituals surrounding Hakumen blended Shinto and Buddhist traditions, reflecting the layered spirituality of Japan. Through prayers, offerings, and festivals, he became a god whose guardianship touched every part of society, teaching that strength and duty were inseparable, and that divine protection was not only for the battlefield, but for the delicate balance of daily life. Benzaiten's grace flowed through water, music, and art, her presence subtle yet deeply transformative. Musicians and poets prayed to her for inspiration, believing that her blessings could turn skill into brilliance. Temples and shrines near rivers, lakes, or islands reflected her domain, where the rippling water seemed to echo her divine voice. Pilgrims left coins, prayer beads, or performances as offerings, trusting that she would bring beauty, fortune, and guidance. Legends told of her temper as well, for she could protect treasures and punish greed, reminding worshippers that divinity carried both generosity and authority. In her, the Japanese saw the intertwining of the artistic, natural, and spiritual realms, a goddess whose flowing essence touched every part of life, turning ordinary moments into something sacred and enduring. Raijin and Fujin together embodied the raw, untamed forces of storm and wind, a dynamic duo whose power shaped both fear and reverence in the hearts of the people. Ra-Ejan's drums cracked like thunder, shaking villages and forests alike, while Fujin's winds bent trees and stirred the seas into frenzy. Temples displayed their fierce visages, carved or painted, to remind humans of the balance between chaos and the life-giving aspects of nature. During festivals, performers donned masks and enacted their battles, the pounding of drums and whistling of flutes echoing the rhythm of their divine energy. Each gust of wind and clap of thunder was understood, not as chance, but as the hands of Fujin and Raijin at work. shaping the world and teaching humility, respect, and offer the invisible forces that moved through life and land alike. Inari's influence touched every corner of daily life, from the rice fields of the countryside to the bustling markets of cities. Farmers prayed for abundant harvests, leaving rice and sake at small shrines along the roads, while merchants sought her favor for prosperity in trade, hanging amulets in their shops and homes. The foxes, her ever-watchful messengers, were seen in stone or wood at shrine gates, holding keys, jewels, or rice in their mouths, guarding both the divine and human treasures. Festivals in her honor filled streets with vermilion torii gates, processions, music, and dancing, creating tunnels of devotion where the gods seemed to walk among the people. Inari reminded all who worshipped her that cleverness, diligence, and faith could shape fortune, and that the divine presence was intricately woven into the fabric of everyday life. Rivers and lakes were sacred arteries of life, flowing with the blessings of gods like Benzaiten and Sweejan. Shrines perched on riverbanks or islands invited pilgrims to leave coins, paper boats, or prayers, trusting the waters to carry their devotion to the divine. Festivals celebrated these waterways with lanterns floating on the surface, music, and dances that mirrored the ripple and flow of life itself. Fishermen, travelers, and villagers alike honored the water, believing that even the smallest stream was imbued with spiritual energy. In Japan, water was never simply a resource, it was alive with divine presence, its currents a constant reminder of the gods' reach and benevolence. Each wave, eddy, or shimmer on the surface was a sign that the sacred flowed through the world, unseen yet deeply felt by those who paused to notice. Forests were sacred sanctuaries where the gods breathed through every tree, stone, and rustling leaf. Pilgrims walking winding paths between towering cedars and pines felt the weight of centuries. In the moss-covered stones beneath their feet, hidden shrines invited offerings of rice, sake, or flowers, and fox statues kept watch as silent messengers of the divine. Priests and worshippers alike moved quietly, sensing the presence of kami in the stillness, where even the smallest animal or bird could carry a message from the gods. In these forests, humans learned humility, patience, and reverence, understanding that the divine was not distant, but woven intimately into the fabric of nature. Every footstep, every whisper of wind, was a reminder that life itself was under the careful watch of unseen hands. Animals acted as vital messengers and symbols of the gods, their presence bridging the human and divine worlds. Foxes, clever and alert, served Inari, carrying prayers and guidance through villages and fields. Cranes and doves signaled peace and divine favor, often appearing near Hachiman's shrines or during festivals. Serpents and dragons represented water, guarding treasures and linking to Benzaitin's domain. Legends told of animals transforming into humans to teach lessons, deliver warnings, or guide travelers, making every encounter sacred. A rustle in the forest, a bird in flight, or a sudden glimpse of a fox was interpreted as a sign that the gods were near, watching, and shaping the world. Through these creatures, the divine presence became tangible, reminding humans that the unseen forces of life were ever active and alive. Pilgrimages to sacred shrines were journeys that tested endurance, faith, and devotion. Travelers crossed mountains, forests, and rivers, following paths marked by stone lanterns and torii gates. Each step a meditation. At Eyes, the shrine of Amaterasu, pilgrims offered rice, sake, and coins yet never glimpsed the sacred mirror, embracing humility and reverence. In northern regions, devotees scaled steep hills to reach Hachiman's shrines, braving wind, rain, and snow, each step a prayer in motion. Upon arrival, the weight of centuries of worship pressed gently on their spirits, connecting them to countless generations who had made the same pilgrimage. These journeys were not simply physical, they were crossings into the presence of the divine, transforming the traveler with every mile walked and every prayer whispered along the way. Festivals united gods, people, and nature in vibrant, living celebrations. Streets overflowed with lanterns, banners, and the scent of incense, while drums and flutes echoed across towns and villages. Raijin and Fujin were honored with performances mimicking thunder and wind, while dancers in fox masks celebrated Inari's cleverness. Makoshi, portable shrines, were carried through the crowds, swaying as if the gods themselves rode among the people. Children scattered flower petals while elders watched with reverence, recalling festivals of their youth. In these moments, the boundary between human and divine blurred, allowing worshippers to feel the gods walking openly among them, sharing in music, motion, and communal joy, reminding all that the sacred was present in both celebration and everyday life. Sacred objects and treasures were tangible connections to the divine, vessels of power and presence. Amaterasu's mirror reflected truth and the bond between goddess and emperor. Susanu's sword, Kusanagi, symbolized courage and protection. Inari's fox statues guarded rice and prosperity, while Ra'ijin's drums warded off evil. Benzaiten's biwa inspired music, fortune, and artistry. These objects were central to rituals, processions, and offerings, carrying the devotion of countless generations. Through them, humans felt the gods' influence in the material world, a constant reminder that divinity was active, shaping lives and destinies with both grace and authority, and that the sacred could be touched, seen, and honored through these timeless treasures. Amaterasu, the sun goddess, stood at the center of Japan's spiritual world, her light both literal and symbolic. She was revered as the ancestor of emperors, a presence whose radiance brought life, order, and harmony. The Ai's shrine, rebuilt every 20 years, symbolized renewal and the sacred bond between heaven and imperial rule. Pilgrims traveled long distances, bowing before gates and offering prayers, knowing they could not see her directly, yet feeling her influence in every sunrise. Her guidance shaped farmers, artists, and rulers alike, embodying truth, morality, and the continuity of the land. Through Amaterasu, the Japanese understood that the divine was woven into the fabric of life. That light itself was both a gift and a lesson, illuminating both the earth and the human spirit. Susanu's legacy endured as a god of both storm and salvation, a deity whose fury and courage shaped the land and its people. His defeat of the eight-headed serpent Orochi was celebrated as an act of heroism, showing that even chaotic power could serve the forces of good. The Kusanagi sword he drew from the serpent's tail became one of Japan's 3 sacred treasures, linking his legend to imperial authority and national identity. Shrines to Susanu appeared near rivers, mountains, and coastal regions, sites where his restless energy was most potent. Festivals reenacted his battles through music, dance, and theatrical performance, teaching that strength without wisdom could be dangerous, yet courage tempered with cunning could protect, heal, and guide. In Susanu, the people saw both the tempest and the calm that follows, a duality mirrored in life itself. Hakumen's protection extended far beyond the battlefield, touching the lives of villagers, merchants, and travelers alike. Coastal communities prayed for safe voyages, farmers sought bountiful harvests, and local leaders held festivals to honor his guardianship. His image, often depicted as an archer or armored figure, adorned shrines at castle gates and along pilgrimage routes, reminding people that courage and vigilance were virtues for all. The rituals surrounding Hakumen blended Shinto and Buddhist practices, reflecting Japan's layered spirituality. Through prayers, offerings, and festivals, Hakumen taught that strength and duty were inseparable, that divine protection was present not only in moments of war, but in the subtle acts of everyday life, guiding, shielding, and inspiring devotion. Across the land, Benzaiten's influence flowed through water, music, and art, shaping inspiration, fortune, and beauty. Musicians and poets prayed to her, believing her blessing could turn skill into brilliance. Shrines near rivers, lakes, or islands reflected her domain, where the gentle ripple of water echoed her divine voice. Pilgrims offered coins, prayer, beads, or performances, trusting she would grant guidance and prosperity. Legends spoke of her power to protect treasures and punish greed, reminding worshippers that divinity carried both generosity and authority. In Benzaiten, the Japanese saw the intertwining of artistic, natural, and spiritual realms, a goddess whose flowing essence touched life, turning ordinary moments into something sacred. showing that grace could be as mighty as the storms or swords of other gods. Raijin and Fujin embodied the raw, untamed forces of storm and wind, shaping both fear and reverence in human hearts. Raijin's drums split the sky with thunder, shaking forests, villages, and temples alike, while Fujin's winds bent trees and whipped the seas into turmoil. Temples displayed their fierce faces, carved in stone or painted vividly, reminding worshippers of the delicate balance between chaos and life-giving force. During festivals, masked performers reenacted their battles, drums pounding and flutes shrieking, bringing the gods' energy into the human world. Each gust of wind, each clap of thunder, was interpreted as their presence, not random chance. The people understood that Raijin and Fujin moved through the world, shaping nature and human lives alike, teaching humility, awe, and respect for powers beyond comprehension. Inari's influence permeated daily life, guiding farmers, merchants, and villagers alike. Fields of rice were blessed with offerings of grain and sake, while shopkeepers hung charms to ensure prosperity and success in trade. The foxes, her sacred messengers, appeared in stone or wood, guarding shrines and households, holding keys, jewels, or rice in their mouths. Festivals in her honor transformed towns with vermilion torii gates, processions, music, and dancing, creating paths where the divine seemed to move among the people. Inari taught that cleverness, diligence, and devotion could shape fortune, and that the god's presence was not distant, but intricately woven into the fabric of everyday life. Through her, the mundane became sacred, and every act of work or worship became a step closer to the divine. Rivers and lakes held sacred significance, flowing with the presence of gods like Benzaiten and Suijin. Pilgrims traveled to shrines perched on riverbanks or islands, leaving coins, paper boats, or prayers, trusting the waters to carry their devotion to the divine. Festivals celebrated these waterways with floating lanterns, music, and dances that mirrored the ripple and flow of life itself. Fishermen, travelers, and villagers honored the water, knowing that even the smallest stream was alive with spiritual energy. In Japan, water was never merely a resource, it was imbued with the essence of the gods, a living force that connected humans to the divine. Each wave, current, or shimmer was a reminder that sacred presence moved silently through the world, touching all who paused to witness it. From the radiant sun goddess to the fierce storm bringers, Japan's gods are more than just myth. They're reflections of nature, spirit, and the unseen forces that shape our world. Whether whispered through ancient shrines or imagined in modern art, their stories continue to inspire awe and wonder. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this journey through the divine, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more video.